tonight.
Tech companies have gained enormous power.
The president's longtime targeting of tech companies could lead to an executive order combating Silicon Valley bias. And a red flag in Dayton. The shooter's mother and her warning to police, what that could mean for gun laws. Plus,
this bill would gut very important religious freedom protections.
The Do No Harm Act could prove entirely harmful to religious freedom. And one carpenter's pilgrimage to build crosses for victims of gun violence. All this and more tonight on Faith Nation.
Does anti-conservative bias exist across social media platforms? Welcome to Faith Nation. I'm John Jessup.
And I'm Jenna Browder. We are hearing reports the White House is drafting an executive order to stop conservative censorship online.
And President Trump is expected to call out what he describes as unfair treatment against conservatives on Facebook, Google, and Twitter.
CBN's White House correspondent Ben Kennedy joins us with the details. Ben?
Well, Jenna, John, that action would likely be in the form of an executive order, but the Trump administration has stopped short of releasing any specifics. We are hearing it is just a draft at this point, although according to a White House official, the order would restore fairness to the system. President Trump has issued numerous warnings that he's watching social media giants very closely.
Massive multinational tech companies have gained enormous power to censor opinions.
The commander-in-chief accusing the tech companies of discriminating against conservatives. Now that talk possibly turning into action, with reports the White House is drafting an executive order. An official told Politico that most of Twitter is liberal cesspools of venom and that the president wants some fairness in the system. Chris, if the White House does move forward with this executive order, could they face lawsuits?
I think it's a possibility. The First Amendment protects Americans from the government restricting any sort of speech.
Chris Lewis is the president and CEO of Public Knowledge. As an advocate for strong due process, he believes the user has the right to appeal any content taken down. Although Lewis says he's not seen evidence of bias against political speech. Social media users share things to express their opinions. Why do you think companies feel the need to silence them?
When there is moderation of speech online, it's typically for reasons that violate the practices and rules of the platform. And that's often for hateful, racist, violent speech. And I think that's a good thing. And it's a fair debate on if there should be that level of moderation.
Conservatives believe they've seen the bias, and many are pointing at Twitter for locking Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell's re-election campaign account Thursday, after it posted video of a profanity-laden protest outside the senator's Kentucky home. McConnell's campaign manager, Kevin Golden, said Twitter will allow the words "Massacre Mitch" to trend nationally on their platform, but locks out our account for posting actual threats against us. Twitter said the account will remain locked until they delete the video. Is there a concern over violence extremism on social media?
There's definitely a concern. And this is why we need to work with the social media companies to fine-tune how they do their moderation.
And again, this executive order is in an early stage. It's not even clear what the penalties would be for violating the president's order. John, Jenna?
All right, Ben Kennedy at the White House, thank you. Well, to Election 2020, a group of about 400 faith leaders is meeting in Lynchburg, Virginia. Their goal, to begin organizing a national ground game.
And that ground game is aimed at mobilizing evangelical pastors to lead the way. CBN's David Brody has the story.
Well, we don't have many answers as this 2020 presidential race unfolds, but here is one thing that we do know. With all the extra vitriol aimed at Donald Trump this time around, the president is going to need an even better showing by white conservative evangelicals if he's going to win a second term. The folks in the pews are going to need to show up at the ballot box, and it's really going to be up to pastors to get them motivated. Now, that effort begins in earnest Thursday and Friday down at Liberty University. This is a closed-door event. One of the largest evangelical universities in the country is going to host it, and it's organized by the American Renewal Project. It's led by influential political mechanic David Lane. They are bringing in hundreds of pastors for the affair. They dub all of this Pastors in Pews, and the goal is to get them motivated, the pastors, to speak out boldly to their congregations about the political and cultural issues of the day. So, in essence, the flock will end up being motivated. Here's a past sampling.
These politicians aren't good at much, but they're good at this. Seeing which way the wind is blowing. We need to change the direction of the wind.
In addition, many of these pastors are also going to take part in a political training session as they mull whether to run for local or statewide office. Now, it's something we have talked about before with the architect, David Lane. Have a look.
If the Lord does it, we're going to turn America back to Him and reestablish a Christian culture. Some of these values are going to reign supreme. So my guess is, spiritually speaking, we need mercy, the mercy of God.
You know, in 2016, David Lane's group was influential and active. In 60 days before the 2016 general election, the last 2 months, they spent $9 million in 6 battleground states, including some big prizes like Florida, Ohio, North Carolina as well. Now, the bigger goal here, of course, is pastors getting trained to run for political office. As we mentioned, in 2016, listen to this, roughly 200 pastors stepped up to run for office. 2018, it was 300 more. Missouri specifically, 5 pastors became state legislators, and this year Missouri passed a ban on abortions after 8 weeks of pregnancy, so you can see some of the result. By the way, the goal for 2020, 1,000 pastors running for office. Of course, that would be a game changer, and the state-by-state approach to all of this begins this week down in Lynchburg. David Brody, CBN News, Washington.
Thank you, David. A growing number of 2020 Democratic presidential candidates is labeling Donald Trump a white supremacist. The shift toward that label comes in the wake of last weekend's deadly mass shootings. Before that, several had already accused the president of being a white nationalist. Now, Beto O'Rourke, Bernie Sanders, and Elizabeth Warren have all shifted their characterization of Donald Trump to a white supremacist.
You've been very clear that you believe the president is a racist. Is the president a white supremacist?
He is. He's also made that very clear.
Of course, the president denies being a racist and yesterday told reporters he's, quote, concerned about the rise of any group of hate, whether it's white supremacy, whether it's any kind of supremacy.
And here now for more is Tom Bevan, co-founder and president of Real Clear Politics. Tom, thanks for joining us. Good to have you.
Great to be with you.
What do you make of this narrative that's out there that President Trump is a white supremacist?
Well, it's definitely a shift in tone, and if you talk about the definition between white nationalists, white supremacists, it's ratcheting it up even more. It isn't an article of faith among Democrats that President Trump is a raging racist. That's certainly not what Republicans think, and it's not necessarily where the rest of the country is. And I think the Democrats run a risk of ratcheting up this rhetoric. Beto O'Rourke also said that Trump's administration was reminiscent of the Third Reich. We've had other Democrats and folks in the media saying that President Trump wanted these things to happen, that he condoned it, that he's responsible for it, that he wanted to exterminate Latinos. And so the harsh escalation of the rhetoric, I think, is not necessarily, it certainly speaks to the Democratic base, but I'm not sure how the rest of the country is receiving it. And it could cause them problems, I think, in a general election.
Speaking of the rest of the country, your perspective, you live in the heartland. Where do you think most Americans are when it comes to race and President Trump?
Well, I think when we have these mass shootings, and we've had a number of them, we go through this same routine every time, and the country is hurting. It's natural for folks to look at what happened there and feel, just sick about it and want solutions. And there's a lot of frustration that we haven't been able to get to any solutions that stop this from happening. What they don't want, I think, is the immediate politicization of a tragedy like that. And right now, we've seen the contrast. Democrats have gone. Not only have they escalated the rhetoric, we just saw the protests outside Mitch McConnell's home, death threats. We've seen Joaquin Castro sort of naming and shaming Trump donors. And on the other side, you've had President Trump. He condemned the shootings. He condemned white supremacy. He went to El Paso and Dayton to serve as sort of consoler in chief. Now, whether you think he's done a good job of that or not, the contrast is pretty stark between the way the president's been acting over the last few days and the way the Democrats have sort of spun off the rails in this. And so, again, I think it's not necessarily a good look for Democrats right now. And I think most Americans just want everybody to sort of take the tone down, take the rhetoric down, and really sort of try and heal and unify if that's even possible in this day and age.
To your point, yesterday, Congressman Joaquin Castro, twin brother of Julian Castro, he released some of the names of Trump supporters, Trump donors in Texas. Tom, what does this say about the current political climate we're living in?
Yeah, and their defense, Castro's defense, and the folks who have been defending this tactic are, well, these are public information, right? This is FEC stuff. It's available to anyone to search online. The problem with that, though, is there's a lot of public information that's out there, where people live, you know, where their kids go to school. We don't publish that information. We don't do it in a way that incites people. What did he want to happen by doing this? He said on an interview, that he wanted people to think twice about supporting someone who he considers to be a racist. And again, so this is, again, taking politics, sort of weaponizing politics and differences in political opinion, taking it to the next level. And by the way, some folks dug into the names that were on the list and found out that 6 of them, of the people on the list, had actually donated to his brother's campaign for president as well. So it was a bit of a backfire on that regard, too.
Real quick here, what do you anticipate will come out of this roundtable tomorrow on censorship?
Well, this is such an interesting, it's a fascinating and also very complicated issue, right? Because there is obviously First Amendment, and you don't want to restrict people's free speech. But at the same time, when you get into sort of the censorship issue, it's a question of, and nobody wants, you know, violence or hateful language on the internet. But the question is, well, who's deciding that, right? And who's making the decisions? Where's the line drawn? And how does that affect different people that are out there with different political ideologies? And what we've seen thus far, and this is why the president's getting involved, is that right now those companies are run by liberals, and conservatives feel like they are bearing the brunt of a lot of the censorship that's going on.
All right, Tom, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for being with us today.
You bet.
Thanks, Tom.
Were crucial warning signs ignored? Still ahead, the new details emerging about the El Paso shooting.
Introducing the CBN Bible from CBN.com. Now, an easier way to study the Bible and grow in your faith. Highlight your favorite verse. Read separate versions at a glance. Click and read a commentary. Or cross-reference your favorite verse using the Strong's Concordance. All the right tools to study the Bible, all in one place. The CBN Bible, available at cbn.com/Bible or the iTunes App Store.
It has the power to influence weight loss, boost your immune system, and improve brain function.
We've seen an explosion of data on the role of the gut microbiome in health.
The free Build a Better Gut booklet reveals the latest information about the gut microbiome. You'll discover how your gut affects the rest of your health.
The gut microbiome has been linked to depression and cancer and heart disease.
Learn how to build a stronger, healthier gut.
The microbiome, if it's in good composition, are really protecting us all the time from more invasive things.
Get the Build a Better Gut booklet, free from the Christian Broadcasting Network. Call 1-800-700-7000 or go to cbn.com/buildabettergut.
You need to make sure that your microbes are working with you, not against you.
And if you order online, you'll get immediate access to the Build a Better Gut series, a digital copy of the booklet, and related bonus material. Build a Better Gut today. Call 1-800-700-7000 or go to cbn.com/buildabettergut for your free copy.
Here, we're committed to a heritage of rigorous scholarship dating back over 1,000 years.
And to a faith tradition dating back 1,000 more.
This is how we create a culture of inquiry where no topic is off limits.
And a culture of hope.
Anything's possible!
It's Christian leadership.
And it's changing the world for the better.
It's higher learning.
It's greater knowing.
It's what makes us whole.
It's what makes us Regent.
Well, new information tonight on the investigation into Saturday's mass shooting in El Paso. The mother of the alleged shooter called local police about her son owning an assault rifle.
Now, that call, though, came weeks before the shooting, yet nothing was done. CBN News national security correspondent Eric Phillips has more on this development.
Lawyers for the family say the woman did not give her name nor the name of her 21-year-old son to Allen police when she called expressing her concerns. That's because they say she didn't think he posed a threat to anyone. Police say they have the shooter who unleashed destruction at the El Paso Walmart, killing nearly 24 people. As debate rages over potential red flag laws, comes the report his mother raised a concern weeks before. She called Allen police, worried her son was too young and inexperienced to handle the assault weapon he'd recently purchased. According to lawyers for the family, she was told the 21-year-old was legally allowed to own the weapon, and authorities sought no further information. Even if they had, they would not have found a criminal record, nor the manifesto he would later post online targeting Hispanic immigrants. It's why Texas Governor Greg Abbott is gathering experts to talk about next steps.
We want to identify ways that we would be able to root out this shooter. Could be from hate online sites or otherwise. But we're going to be looking into everything to do everything we can to make sure that we keep El Paso safe, but all Texans safe from another event like this.
According to a new Political Morning Consult poll taken after both shootings, nearly 70% of American voters would favor a ban on assault-style weapons, and 73% favor stricter gun laws, including universal background checks, spanning both Democrats and Republicans.
As I get closer, I see the blood in the back of his head.
For Dion Green, it's personal. He watched as his father died after the attack in Dayton, Ohio Sunday morning. Police say the gunman used a modified assault weapon.
Just stopped moving, so I'm just telling him, like, I love you. Come on, Dad, get up. We got to get out of here. Like, you can get a gun anywhere nowadays. You know, in the wrong person's hand is, well, I just experienced that.
Now word that the White House has invited internet and technology companies to a roundtable discussion on violent online extremism. It comes after a directive from the president to develop tools to help detect mass shooters before they strike. In Washington, Eric Phillips, CBN News.
And joining us now is Jack Jenkins, national reporter for Religion News Service. Jack, thanks for being with us.
Thanks so much for having me.
Jack, you were down in Charleston, South Carolina yesterday covering the speech of 2020 hopeful Cory Booker, where he spoke at Mother Emanuel AME Church. I know it was a speech, as you noted, that had overt religious overtones laced with scriptural references and biblical themes. What was your impression of his speech, and how did the audience respond?
Well, I think if you look at Cory Booker's past, he's actually no stranger to talking about faith and inculcating it into his political rhetoric. But this one felt really strong. I think for him, this speech was meant to be a landmark speech about racism and gun violence, and his political message to America. But he definitely, he was including explicit references to Galatians, talking about you reap what you sow, and kind of framing opposition to Trump in that context, but also talking about how faith has led to people being able to respond to tragedy by looking within and looking not only to God but to each other, God in each other. And I spoke to people after the speech, and they seemed to resonate with Cory Booker. I spoke with two different members of the church, of the Emanuel AME Church, and one in particular said, I really resonated with what he said about faith being something that is proactive. It's not, as he put it, this was a man who lost his sister in the shooting in 2015. He said, it's often, we can say thoughts and prayers, but for me, faith is an action. It requires action. So he resonated with that aspect of Cory Booker's speech.
What about some of the other candidates? How are they tackling the whole gun debate?
Yeah, I mean, you run the gamut, as you've seen, everyone from Beto O'Rourke, obviously, with the El Paso shooting. This is something that's very close to him. He's been in the news quite a bit, discussing it as something that is personally, frustrating for him, consoling victims, that sort of thing. And obviously, you've seen across the board many Democratic candidates link the shooting to President Trump. Saying that the rhetoric, particularly in El Paso, where the shooter is believed to have been inspired by white nationalist rhetoric, they ascribe the president having. They say he is either used white nationalist rhetoric or has at least propagated it or been embraced by white nationalists, and so they tie it to him. And I will say that Booker was interesting in that it was less critique and more optimism in his speech compared to a lot of the other people in the 2020 field.
Now, and religious leaders, what are we seeing from them following these shootings?
So you run the gamut, right? So you have people like Franklin Graham, who was tweeting out just yesterday that we should Where does this hatred come from, is he asked. And he said it doesn't come from the blade of a knife or the barrel of a gun. It comes from the heart. And Richard Land from Southern Evangelical Seminary, he was arguing that gun violence prevention legislation would only be a Band-Aid and that we need to look deeper into society. But there's a lot of other faith leaders that are making a very different argument. Just outside of Senator Mitch McConnell's office this week, a group of pastors and rabbis, evangelical leaders as well as Episcopalian bishops and rabbis, were calling for the Senate Majority Leader to, open up votes for gun violence prevention legislation. What they wanted ran the gamut between an assault weapons ban to just universal background checks, but they wanted some legislative answer. And people forget, for a lot of these, tragedies, there are the first responders, police and medical personnel and firefighters that are there. But there's another kind of first responder, and that's faith leaders who often are the ones consoling the families, and they're the ones who run the funerals. And so a lot of these folks have been advocating for gun violence prevention for a long time, in part because it's so personal to them, and they've been affected by it.
All right, Jack Jenkins, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you all for having me.
Well, still ahead, a new bill that aims to chip away at religious freedom. Why the Do No Harm Act could make it harder for people to live out their faith.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com. Want to be a part of a community that inspires your spiritual growth while winning prizes? The all-new MyCBN app. Connect with the community for prayer and encouragement. Track and set spiritual goals. Enjoy conversation starters with friends and family. And collect points to win prizes. The all-new MyCBN app. A great place to belong. Download the app at cbn.com/mobile. Grow, connect, have fun. The all-new MyCBN app.
Watch breaking news, in-depth exclusive stories and programs, from health to entertainment, you won't find anywhere else. The CBN News Channel, a perspective you can trust. Enjoy credible news reporting from around the world. Discover inspiring programs and stories of hope, all in one place, from a Christian perspective. The CBN News Channel, a perspective you can trust. Check your local listings or visit cbnnewschannel.com.
Come home to the sounds of Southern Gospel from CBN Radio. You'll enjoy a rich Southern blend of bluegrass, classic gospel, and Southern gospel favorites like the Gaithers, the Crab Family, and bluegrass sounds like Mountain Faith. So make yourself at home with the all-new CBN Southern Gospel, now available at cbnradio.com.
And welcome back. A bill up for consideration in Congress could make it more difficult for Americans to live out their faith.
The Do No Harm Act aims to strip away parts of the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, and religious freedom advocates are sounding the alarm.
This bill would gut very important religious freedom protections for countless Americans, people of all walks of life, of Christians, Muslims, Jews, and so many others that throughout the 25-year history of the Religious Freedom Restoration Act have had their right to freely live out their faith protected against government efforts to tell them that they must violate their conscience or do something that violates their beliefs.
Matt Sharp with the Alliance Defending Freedom says the bill's name is misleading and would do great harm to people of faith.
For its 25-year history, the Religious Freedom Restoration Act has been used to, for example, protect the freedom of a Native American boy to be able to wear his hair long consistent with his faith. It's protected healthcare providers and individuals who objected to paying for contraceptions or abortions or things like that. And it even helps faith-based adoption providers be able to operate consistent with their faith while helping kids to find a forever home.
And it protected Hobby Lobby in a 2014 case that went all the way to the Supreme Court. The Affordable Care Act had mandated all employers fund insurance for abortion-inducing drugs. The owners of Hobby Lobby said doing this violated their religious conscience. And in a 6-2 vote, the court sided with them, citing RFRA.
purpose of the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, RFRA, is to protect the rights of individuals of faith all across the country, regardless of what faith that is.
And according to Craig Parshall with the National Religious Broadcasters, this goes all the way back to the Founding Fathers.
If you look back to the original founding intention in the debates in Congress behind the writing of the First Amendment, what was in the minds of the founders as established in the congressional record at the time, it's real clear what they wanted to make sure was that government would never coerce a person to do or say or engage in something that violated their religious conscience.
Supporters of the Do No Harm Act believe RFRA is too often used as a weapon to discriminate against women, minorities, and the LGBTQ community. Both Parshall and Sharp disagree.
They're pushing this idea that RFRA is harmful, that it's being used to hurt other individuals, and that's simply false.
And right now, the Do No Harm Act has been introduced in both the House and the Senate, but only the House has held a hearing on it.
When we come back, one man's mission to honor those killed by gun violence. That story when we return.
Tikkun Olam.
This is our nature as a country.
To make the world a better place.
Literally, we felt the earth shaking.
The Christian Broadcasting Network presents To Life, how Israeli volunteers are changing the world.
This film needs to be seen by everyone.
I was in tears.
Now you can own the inspiring documentary To Life on DVD.
There is blood on our hands if we know and we walk away.
I'm so grateful that this film was made.
To Life can be yours for a gift of $10 or more. Call 1-800-700-7000 or log on to CBN.com.
We know that every minute counts to save life.
It'll bless Israel, but it'll also bless all the friends of Israel.
Discover the untold story of how Israeli volunteers are making the world a better place. Call 1-800-700-7000 or log on to CBN.com to get your copy today.
I am Region's first ROTC graduate student.
As the country tries to make sense of this weekend's mass shootings, one man is on a mission to make sure the victims are remembered.
He's doing that by setting up crosses with the names of each victim. This week, Greg Zahn has traveled to El Paso and then to Dayton, Ohio to set up crosses for the 9 people killed there.
If you're a victim in a mass shooting, immediately you're one of 9, understand today. I'm making these 9 people today a family together. I'm also making the city a family here. And of course, with the way I'm doing it, I do everybody, it really brings the country together.
Greg has been traveling the country setting up crosses for victims since the late 90s. Since then, he has made more than 21,000 crosses in an effort to bring healing and hope. When asked why he travels around doing what he does, Greg simply says, we need to show that we love one another. And Jenna, this really hits home for him because back in '96, his father was killed in gun violence. So this, again, is quite personal for him.
Really, yeah, and very selfless. It's neat to see.
Well, that's it for this edition of Faith Nation.
Have a great evening.